I'm coming to you today from Johannesburg, South Africa. His name is Nelson Mandela, and he's the focus of protests against apartheid. Jailed 23 years ago after being charged with 153 acts of violence and sabotage, he's never recanted his revolutionary rhetoric. Bishop Tutu says of him, he is head and shoulders above everyone else. He must be a remarkable man. Mandela played a crucial role organizing the outlawed political group known as the African National Congress. We'll be referring to it in the program as the ANC. The Marxist-oriented strategy of the ANC is dedicated, some say, to the violent overthrow of the South African government. Its so-called Freedom Charter reads like a socialist manifesto. It declares, quote, the mineral wealth beneath the soil, the banks and monopoly industry shall be transferred to the ownership of the people. End quote. Nelson Mandela's wife, Winnie, has sometimes been called the mother of her nation. I want you to listen carefully to this following excerpt from one of her speeches, which was recorded clandestinely. Now, keep in mind, this was done secretly, so the quality isn't the best, but I want you to listen carefully what Winnie Mandela, a hero in the American press, really says.
We are not prepared for any so-called reforms to apartheid. You cannot reform a sin. Apartheid is a criminal act against mankind. We are no longer prepared to tolerate that criminal act by a minority. The white man has the audacity. He is 3.5 million. We are 30 million. The other regime can go to hell. Power to the people! Power to the people!
Now, to interpret that for you a little bit, let me comment on what she said. At one point, she said the Botha regime can go to hell. We are 30 million strong. I think she has her population figures just a little bit off. Now, this is a very brief excerpt, but a very fascinating one. You need to listen carefully because she's going to make a statement about how the children of the white people were brought up by the blacks, how the blacks could have killed them at any time but did not. And then she's going to make a statement that the necklaces will liberate our country. Now listen carefully.
We cleaned up the white man's children. We could have killed them any day we wanted to. With our necklaces, we shall liberate this country.
What is a necklace? What does she mean when she says, with our necklaces, we shall liberate this country? Well, let me tell you what she's talking about. Earlier today, I was privileged to visit a place that few South Africans and virtually no Americans have ever seen. The headquarters of the South African Police Force. I was shown a video shot by the press, not seen in the outside world. Necklacing is the practice of placing a rubber tire around the neck of a victim, someone the ANC believes is a collaborator, filling the tire with gasoline, then setting it afire, burning the victim alive. I don't think I'll ever forget looking into the eyes of one victim, a young man who was run down and literally hacked and stabbed to death. As I watched this video, the attackers repeatedly stabbed him until his body was reduced to a pulp of flesh and blood. And this is what the renowned Winnie Mandela is advocating as the way to liberating her country. And like most of you, I find apartheid abhorrent. But what's taking place in the black townships is violence of blacks against blacks. In many cases, it's murder, not political liberation that's being sought. I have by my side here Craig Williamson, who served in the South African Police Force for how many years, Craig?
17 years before I resigned at the end of last year.
Did you consider yourself a spy?
Well, spy always tends to evoke pejorative feelings. I was an agent, an undercover agent, like there are undercover agents in all law enforcement agencies, including in the United States.
But you're white. How could you infiltrate a black organization dedicated to terrorism?
Well, quite simple, really, and that is because as a white, I was involved in the Marxist wing, the South African Communist Party. And through involvement with them, I became associated with the Black African Nationalist Organization, which they have been infiltrating since the 1920s.
So you're saying behind the scenes, they don't make any contention whatsoever, hiding the fact that there's collaboration between the Communist Party and the African National Congress. It's a known fact behind the scenes?
Well, actually, Bob, more than a known fact behind the scenes, we have a situation where, in fact, most of the leadership of the African National Congress are, in fact, very proud of the fact that there is an alliance between the African National Congress and the South African Communist Party.
Were you afraid for your life at any time?
Well, of course, in the type of job I was doing, infiltrating a revolutionary organization, you have to fear for your life because some people doing the same job as I did have, of course, died for it.
All right, I want to play an excerpt now that you may have heard. This is one of the former terrorists who now has left the African National Congress, and he has some fascinating things to say about what they do to you if you ever try to get out. Listen carefully.
Tell me, how did it happen that you joined the ANC?
Like I have said, I was a victim of a political wave that swept the country during the 70s. And the common happenstances, like the June 16 uprising. So I was affected naturally. And I felt like it was a challenge to me, like any other youth at that time, to go and join the ANC.
You then actually left South Africa and underwent training. Where did you undergo training?
I've been trained by the Cubans in Angola during 77.
And what did they teach you then?
A lot of military skills, including the guerrilla warfare tactics.
How did it happen that you came back to South Africa? Were you tasked with a specific thing to do?
Naturally, I was. But then, at the time I came back, I'd already changed my mind because of the bitter experiences in Angola.
And tell me more about that.
The people don't realize that the ANC is not what it preaches to be. And then, given time, you get acquainted with the hypocrisy within the movement itself, the corruption, unnecessary murders of innocent people who are accused of being enemy agents. And these things gradually reveal and exposes the ANC to yourself. And you come to a final decision to quit. Although the decision, when you primarily make it, it's your own thing. Because if they realize you are going to change your mind, they will isolate you. That is exterminating.
They will exterminate you. Craig, were you ever concerned that they might want to exterminate you?
Well, Bob, not really that they would want to exterminate me, because at no time until, of course, the very end, when a defector revealed my true identity, did I fear that they, in fact, knew that I was working for the South African government. But always in the back of my mind, I was absolutely sure that were my true role to be revealed, I would have been automatically exterminated.
When we talk about necklacing, when we talk about this kind of violence, this is not blacks against white, is it, Craig?
No, Bob. Most of the violence and most of the death and destruction in the so-called revolutionary struggle that is taking place in South Africa is being committed by black on black.
Now, this is the killing, the murders. What I saw today in the videos, this was all blacks against black. No, they weren't attacking whites. This was other blacks that they felt had been either too sympathetic with or somehow collaborating with the whites. And that's a pretty loose term.
Yes, I think it's very difficult for non-South Africans who haven't made an in-depth study of South Africa to understand the degree to which the South African body politic is in fact divided. And black politics is divided amongst various groups, including, of course, the supporters of the African National Congress. But then there are various other organizations And in specific, there are the followers of the Pan-Africanist Congress and the ZAPO, who take an anti-ANC and pro-Africanist line.
Craig Williamson, you were on the inside, and surely there must have been some talk about revolutionary terrorist tactics. Tell me, what motivates someone to do this to a fellow human being, psychologically, ideologically?
Well, Bob, this is something that I would like to explain to people like the caller Paul, and that is that there is unfortunately a situation in South Africa, like in many other pre-revolutionary situations in the world, where frustrated people, and people who in fact are worried about their oppression, their situation in society, who feel disenfranchised, who feel powerless about having an influence on their future. And unfortunately, there are also other very cynical politicians involved, and as I mentioned before, Marxists, people who are manipulating the desire for freedom of the African nationalist movement, and people who, in a very irresponsible and a very emotional way, tell the youth, particularly the youth of the cities in South Africa, that the way to liberation is but one way, and that is violence. And that the way to liberation is the violent destruction of everything that the system stands for.
Yeah, now, I noticed in the video I saw, not only were they stabbing people, they were getting a real thrill out of finding cars, attacking the people inside, running them off, flipping the cars over, knocking a hole in the gas tank, setting the car on fire. Cars just picked at random, houses, torching home. What is the point of this anarchistic senselessness of destroying property?
Well, that is unfortunately what has become called in South Africa the Pol Pot syndrome. The syndrome where basically children are being used to destroy all symbols of an affluent society.
Are you referring to the Khmer Rouge thing with Pol Pot and the way he took over there, sort of the killing fields type of thing?
That is absolutely correct, where they killed anybody who had any education whatsoever, where they killed people who owned property. And we're getting a situation in South Africa where some irresponsible elements, some revolutionary elements, hoping, of course, to be able to pick up the reins of power after the Armageddon in this country, are encouraging children to, because obviously, as you know, children don't think politically or ideologically, and encouraging them to destroy these symbols of affluent and prosperous society.
Now, one of the things I did notice in these videos, it was remarkable. There were very few adults. Now, some of the marshals that had identifiable T-shirts, kind of whipping the crowd into the frenzy, standing around the fringes, looked to be a little older. But these looked to be, some of them, children. Barely out of grade school, certainly teenagers at the most. They seem to constitute a majority of the mob.
Yes, Bob, I would say the majority are probably in their early teens, but many children involved are unfortunately of the age of 6 and above. This has happened in other places. Northern Ireland is just one example.
Now, the pictures that I saw also showed what I thought was a remarkable amount of restraint on behalf of the police force. Now, I'm not apologetic here for the police force, because I know rubber bullets have been used and water cannons, and people have been terribly injured. But I'll tell you, if I were a policeman standing there and I saw a mob, and these were crazy people, thousands marching down this street, who had just torched a house, and they had a person chained or roped in front of them that they were dragging to burn, I don't know but what I'd want to get out of there. It must be a frightening situation for a young police cadet to be standing there.
Yeah, that's a very interesting observation, and one that one doesn't often hear. One has to understand, obviously, that many of the police officers involved in combating riot situations are in fact not much older than most of the people involved in the riots. They're people who have joined the force, who are involved in law enforcement activities, and they're human beings like all of us, and they're people who also can fear.
We call them the House of Representatives and the U.S. Senate, the two highest legislative bodies in our country. They are apportioned, in the case of Congress, by population. The Senate consists of 2 elected officials from each state. There are other qualifications, but none of them are based upon racial distinctions. That's not the case in South Africa. National government consists of 3 houses, a white controlling body, a colored body, and a mixed racial heritage body. an Asian assembly. My guest this evening is Dennis de la Cruz, Minister of Parliament, Commissioner of Oaths, and leader of the opposition Democratic Workers' Party House of Representatives Parliament. I'm confused. Dennis, please straighten this all out for me. In America, it's real simple. 2 houses. 1 man, 1 vote. A House of Representatives, so many representatives from each state, a portion in population, and the Senate, which has 2 from each state. Very simple. You got 3 of them here. Okay, the whites, how many do they have?
The whites have approximately 187.
187. Is this based on there are states within South Africa? So many states have so many representatives?
Well, there are so many constituencies, and each of them are represented by a white member of parliament.
Okay.
And that is, we have a ratio of 4-to-1 based on the number of people we have belonging to that particular race group.
Wait a minute. Now, the whites get a 4.
The whites get 4 to every 2 coloreds, to every 1 Asian or Indian.
Okay, and that's based on population.
Yeah.
Okay, now what is the white body called?
The white body is called the House of Assembly. The colored body is called the House of Representatives.
That's what you're in.
I'm in there. I'm the opposition leader in the House of Representatives.
Okay.
And then you have the House of Delegates, where we have 40 Asian or Indian members of Parliament.
But the whites have veto power over anything that the other 2 houses. Can I call them houses? Is that right?
You can call them houses, yes.
Yeah, but the other 2 houses. Okay, the delegates and the representatives, whatever they would want to pass, really doesn't make any difference. The whites can say, we don't like it.
Well, yes, to a point they have got the veto there, but for the first time in our history, we are able to present our voice at top level. For the first time in South Africa's history, people of color can be involved and are involved at the top forum.
Okay, how do I know what you are? But looking at you, how am I supposed to tell? Your wife's not even the same color you are.
Look, the thing is, de la Cruz. I mean, de la Cruz.
That sounds Spanish.
They call me a man of La Mancha. If you go back into my family history, you would trace one back, Juan de la Cruz. That's the original Spanish.
So what, the Spanish sailor stop off along the way here 3 generations ago, and here you are?
Well, he must have, but, I believe not in where we come from, but where we are going to as a Christian. I think there's too much emphasis today on what you are and where you come from. I believe in where we are going to be important.
Okay, this is a serious question, though. I mean, it is a matter of racial distinction. I mean, you are officially classified as a colored, and who says you're colored? I mean, it's got to do with a birth certificate, I guess, doesn't it?
Well, the South African government is part of an ideology. It's a white ideology which I regard as ungodly, unethical, and humanly unacceptable. I mean, colored, to me it means nothing, but it...
you would be black in America.
Well, it takes away my dignity, but I'm still a human being, and being a Christian and being a believer in the Lord Jesus Christ means more to me than being South African.
Now, why do they technically classify you as colored? Because if I saw you walking down the street in America, I would say, you're black.
Well, I'm classified as colored. My mother comes from a mixed origin. My father is more white than black, but the color of my skin is not white, and so I'm colored.
Aren't you really a sellout? I mean, aren't you a puppet to the Botha regime? Aren't you legitimizing apartheid by allowing the appearance of a reformist policy, which the whites really don't ever intend to pursue?
No, I don't believe in that. I believe in the policy of nonviolence. Because I believe that meaningful change cannot be brought about by using violence in this or any other country, I do believe that the situation, the opportunity created for me in South Africa as a leader and politician, although it may not be the ideal situation, for the first time in the history of our country, I'm able to confront whites on this policy.
But don't blacks represent what you're doing?
No.
They're not mad at you?
Up to this point in time, blacks are not yet included. I'm battling, along with others, to get back blacks represented in Parliament. And this is the main drawback.
But don't some blacks consider you a quisling? Don't they think you're selling out?
Well, some of them do. But I believe that because the present situation was brought about from the black drawing boards. The draftsman of a dominant white government, this was the only opportunity created for us to come in at top level to present our case. And I did not feel that it would be in the country's interest for me to let the opportunity slip by, for me to come forward to represent my case and to tell the world exactly how I feel about change in South Africa.
Are blacks more nationalistic because they refuse to participate in what some say is a sham of democracy?
No, I don't think they're more nationalistic. I think that there is this false impression that South Africa belongs to black people. Now, the indigenous people, 300 years ago when the first white settlers landed here, the indigenous people of South Africa were of mixed origin, a yellowish-brown type of people. The blacks now living in South Africa were not the original South Africans as the redskins were in America when the whites first landed.
Wait a minute. You're telling me the blacks weren't even here first?
No, the blacks were not here. They were migrant people that they moved up and down from the equator, from the middle part of Africa or Central Africa, seeking pastures for their herds, but they never settled indigenously in South Africa. They never took the country unto themselves. It was a free country when whites first came to settle here.
The radicals don't like you, do they really? Are they secretly jealous that you've got a chance to affect public policy and they don't?
I think that the radicals are more inspired and influenced by communist forces outside of South Africa who wish to make South Africa ungovernable and unmanageable, and the radicals want to see a communist regime take over South Africa, and I am totally opposed to a communist regime taking power in South Africa.
White, all right, brown, turn around, black, stay back. Someone dropped that phrase to me today. What does it mean? White, all right, brown, turn around, black, stay back.
Well, I think it's a popular slogan which somebody coined because blacks do not enjoy as much opportunity as they should in South Africa at this point in time. But because of the tremendous backlog which have built up over the years, there are still a number of avenues which must be opened by the government of the day before blacks can enjoy a full equality as whites do in this country.
Does your involvement in Parliament give you, do you think, any valuable experience that's going to be needed in the country? There hasn't been a history of minorities knowing much about self-government. Do you think you're getting that experience for the future?
Yes, well, look, for me, after 2 years, I'm still a journeyman. I'm learning much about how laws should be made, how parliaments work. I mean, you must remember for 300 years, effectively, and at least the past 5 decades, people of color were not involved at parliamentary level. We come from a political wilderness out in the desert where we were not allowed to participate at government level. And coming in at this point of time in my life, I'm still learning a parliamentary procedure. But I do know what is right for my people and what we have been denied over the years.
Okay, but you still cannot pass legislation in your house and force the White House to go along with it. If you and the Asian House of Delegates got together, and you said it's 4-2-1, well, it'd be 4-3 then if the two of you got together. You couldn't get together, pass something, and present it to the White House and say, this is what we want to be law. You can't do that.
Look, we cannot change the laws at the moment, but our influence and our participation in debate in the parliamentary committee level is keeping out laws which, if we were not present in the present system, would have gone through anyhow. We are preventing further discriminatory laws from being published, and we are breaking down existing laws. We are forcing the hand of the government for the first time in the history of South Africa to discard some of those discriminatory practices.
Let's see what Richard in Dallas has to say. Go ahead, Richard.
Bob, I'm a black pastor here in Dallas, and I have a question. I want to know if there is not one man, one vote in South Africa. I want to clarify that. Did I understand you to say that the whites have 4 votes to the blacks over there? If so, I'd like to know the justification for that. And then
Okay, hang on just for a minute now. Hang on, before we get into that, let me clarify something else here. It's not this. I'm glad he brought this up because there's so much confusion. It's not even for white votes to one black vote. It's even more than that because the blacks have no representation. Let's get this straight now. There are 3 houses: white, colored, and Asian.
Yeah.
Okay, now it's those 4 that are apportioned on a 4-to-1 ratio, correct?
Yes, right, it is.
Okay, so you have 4 white votes for every 2 colored votes, 4 white votes for every 1 Indian,
yeah,
and you have 4 white votes for 0 black votes.
That's right.
Okay, got that, Richard?
that is the most abominable thing that I have ever heard of in all of my life. You don't have a democracy there, you have a game. You have a silly little game. It's not real at all. And if I had a chance to get over there, I'd lead every black over there in the right to vote. That's the first thing that needs to be done. If I were
The problem is, Richard, if you tried to do that, you'd be hit with a water cannon, probably. You wouldn't get very far marching down the street doing that, Richard.
I would call on millions of my black brothers in South Africa to lay down across railroad tracks and stop transportation, and if they kill us, fine. We'll not resist them, and then the rage of God and all of the true Christians of the world will bring that game you have over there down to a crashing halt.
Well, now, hang on for a minute. Now, let's come to you, Mr. De La Cruz. He's kind of throwing the gauntlet back at you here. So how come you're not out there laying down on the railroad tracks? How come you're not out there marching down the streets? You've got the power of the people. Why are you not doing it?
You know, it's very easy to be 12,000 miles away to speaking from a country you've not even visited. I want to invite this person who just phoned in to come to South Africa and come and look at the real situation. It is not so easy to get people together and to come and tell them to lay themselves down on railway tracks. It just doesn't work because we have a number of different blacks in South Africa. Unlike the type of black we have in your country, we have a number of tribal groups in South Africa, and we are divided amongst ourselves.
You tell me, if you want to get all the blacks together to lay down on a railroad track, they'd be arguing about which track to lay down on?
They would be arguing which track to lay on and which tribe will lay down first. The blacks in South Africa are not united. They may be united in some political ideology, but they are still separated by the ethnic divisions.
Okay, what are you going to do then, Richard?
You need a Martin Luther King over there. Is there not a Martin Luther King in South Africa that will resist nonviolently, but indeed resist? You've got a sham of a democracy over there. It's a game. It's not real at all.
I can't believe, I don't agree with you that even the great Martin Luther King, and I have a great respect for him, the great Martin Luther King did not achieve equality for every black American in America today. And I still want to be convinced that there is that equality for every black American in America today that you are wishing for me in South Africa. It's no use dictating and advocating something for me in this country 12,000 miles away from you, which I do not believe, and I do know that not all black Americans enjoy in your country at the moment. So what are we talking about here?
Yeah, so there, Richard.
We can all vote. We can all vote. So there
You can all vote, yes, but you are still minority. I do feel that the average black American are still as oppressed as the average black in South Africa. You must convince me that I'm wrong.
We can all vote.
Right, you can vote. But even if all the blacks in America do vote, have you achieved equality and freedom, that democracy which even the great Martin Luther has spoken about?
We can all
really
vote.
as free.
We can all
All right. I can also vote. I have also cast my vote, but I'm still not free. I can also vote. Vote is not freedom. Vote is not democracy. I think your vote in America is a sham as a vote which I have in this country.
This is the end of Side 1. Please turn the cassette over at this point for the continuation of the message on Side 2.
Most Americans have an oversimplified view of the racial spectrum in South Africa. Let me remind you again that this is not a struggle just between blacks and whites. Two other racial factions, coloreds and Asians, complicate that landscape. In addition, black themselves are divided into various tribes, each with their own identity and self-interest in mind. Thus, any political solution must account for the legitimate aspirations of all parties concerned. Secondly, the outside world has failed to comprehend the diversity within the political framework of the South African parliamentary system. Now, in America, you're either a Democrat or a Republican, with other parties representing negligible factions. Well, here there are three houses in Parliament, and a fractured body politic that makes for a very complex scope. That's why this evening we've invited representatives of yet another political opposition group as well as a private sector group. And I want to explain to you who's here and what's going on. First of all, Horace van Rensenberg. Horace, if I got that right, is that pretty close? My Afrikaans isn't that great.
Horace van Rensburg.
Horace van Rensburg. Do I want to roll that R? Rensburg.
Roll it if you like.
Okay. Progressive Federal Party. The Progressive Federal Party is what? To the left of the Botha regime?
To the left of the government, yes.
To the left of the government. Very far left?
Not very far left. It's a liberal, middle-of-the-road party in South Africa.
Okay. Seated next to him is David Darling, who is also one of his colleagues. Both of you, correct, are members of Parliament?
That is right.
Okay. And would you characterize yourself in relationship to Mr. Rensburg over here, to the left or to the right of him? You're seated to his right, but politically, are you in his camp or not?
I think we're pretty much on the same wavelength.
Pretty much on the same wavelength.
There may be nuances, but other than that, our philosophy is the same.
All right, and then John Gogosia. I tell you what, I need a medal for just learning how to pronounce names over here between the African and the Afrikaner names. John represents an organization called Operation Advance and Upgrade, and John, you work with the private sector, correct?
Yes, with the private sector. Yes.
What's your intent? What are you trying to do with the funds that you raise?
We are out to upgrade the quality of life of our black people so that they can fit into the new South Africa.
Is this through education or what?
Through education, and also to educate them on the different political systems in order to find the one that which will be best suitable for South Africa.
All right. This is going to be an interesting discussion this evening. Now, before we get into this, because the background of this program is formatted on the basis of Christian principles, there's a couple of points I think that I need to make. And I want to explain this again. I came here at the invitation of the U.S. and the South African religious broadcasters organizations who paid for and arranged for this trip. So my interest is bringing you, our audience, a deeper understanding of what some think is the major news event of 1986. More importantly, I want to underscore the strategic importance of South Africa. Now, I'm not just talking about mineral wealth, but spiritual ramifications as well. Now, as a Christian broadcaster, I'm concerned about future opportunities of presenting the gospel in Africa and the Third World, and how American Christians handle the situation of apartheid is going to be seen by others as an example of how the gospel addresses the issues of human justice and the temporal needs of men. Now, we must be careful that we become so busy saving men's souls we forget to minister to the whole man and uplift his human condition as well as his spiritual aspirations. And if we fail to see the deep longing for human dignity in the South African racial struggle, if we inadvertently turn this lovely land to the communists, or if we preach pie in the sky and forget that man does need bread to live, we will be harshly judged by history as well as those who may be potential recipients of our message. And that's why I think it is so important for us to debate these issues with knowledgeable spokespersons such as my guest this evening. Solutions. In a word, gentlemen, let me go around the table here and ask you to give you a very beautiful... John, you and I may have... These guys are politicians, so we must not let them out-talk us tonight. John, you make sure you get your word in there, okay?
Well, at least they're paid for talking. They get paid for...
Well, okay, John, let me go to you first. Move in a little closer to the microphone there for me, will you? John... Solution. In a few brief words, what is the solution to the problem of apartheid? What direction do you want your people to go?
The first suggestion I would make is that apartheid must be scrapped. In other words, apartheid must be killed and buried. and then from then on move into a dispensation that is going to make it possible for people of different races to live together in harmony. In other words, a constitution that will make that possible.
A one-man, one-vote constitution?
Not necessarily one man, one vote. I don't believe in one man, one vote because, as I've said before, that all over Africa we've seen what one man, one vote has done. It has been one man, one vote once, and after that is nothing but chaos and a way down.
Which is what happened in Zimbabwe.
We are trying to avoid that in South Africa.
Okay, Mr. Darling, what are we going to do? What is the solution?
Well, I do believe that a solution cannot be based on an ethnic structure. I think that we have to find a constitution and a solution which represents fundamental change from what we have now, and a solution which will ensure that everybody plays a part in the government, but one which also avoids domination by any one group over the other. I think those are the directions we've got to look in.
What about the one-man, one-vote issue? Because that seems to be a rallying cry. Is it going to be practical in an interim period until the electorate is properly educated and they understand what participatory democracy is all about?
I don't think that there's any leader, black leader of any consequence in this country who will settle for anything less than one man, one vote. By one man, one vote, one means that universal adult suffrage, which is experienced in the United States and in every democratic country in the world. The crux of the matter is not whether everybody has a vote. The important thing is within what structure is that vote cast. In other words, what is that vote worth? And I think that must become the subject of a negotiation between the leadership of white South Africa and the credible leadership of black South Africa. And out of that negotiation must come a structure within which one man, one vote can operate.
Horace, is that your sentiment? Do you have anything to add to that?
Yes, I think the most important requirement in South Africa at the present stage is a process of peaceful change, peaceful, orderly, constructive change to achieve a just society of equal rights, full citizenship rights for all the people of the country, which would ensure a true democracy and would allow the free enterprise system to operate.
That means you suggest that there should be an immediate dismantling of apartheid or a gradual process whereby, for example, the colored and the Asian houses would be integrated with an additional black house and a progressive kind of power sharing.
Now, I believe that what is important is to put in place a process of negotiation, a system of negotiation, where the leaders of all the groups within the society can sit down around a single conference table, analyze the problems, and synthesize a new constitution for South Africa.
A fourth house for the blacks?
No. That may be the consensus of everybody sitting around that table. But that's not what I believe the
Start with the table,
be.
reach the consensus. We talk about the right and its role in the politics of South Africa. And I have special guests with me. You remember Dennis de la Cruz? You are colored. To me, you're whatever. In America, you would be classified as black, most probably, or I don't know, but you're colored. You're colored because why?
Well, in South Africa, they look at the color of my skin. De la Cruz, you wouldn't find a black South African, any black with Negroid features, having the surname De La Cruz. I don't believe I'm colored. I don't believe I'm black. I'm just a human being. But in South Africa, because of a white ideology, whites have labeled me colored because of a mixed parentage. My father comes from white parents. My mother comes from the Middle East. And because the color of my skin is not pure white, I'm labeled colored, whatever that means. I do not know. I'm just human, and I'm Christian, and I'm South African.
Okay, you have a gentleman on the left of you and a gentleman on the right of you. To your left is Louise Stoffbeck. How did I do on that? Is that pretty good, pronouncing that?
Yes, you're doing very well.
Okay, you are with the HNP. Just tell us, for the sake of the audience, what that represents. What is the name of the party when you say it in Afrikaans?
The HNP is really the reconstituted National Party.
What does HNP stand for?
HNP means Herstigde Nasionale Partij.
Okay, now you folks understand why I'm just saying the HNP. You are a member of Parliament. How long have you served?
I've been a member of parliament now for a year, and previously I had another session of about 3 years.
And the HNP feels that President Botha is not going fast enough in making reforms and dismantling apartheid, correct?
No, very wrong. You're absolutely wrong. We are dead set against Mr. Botha's reform policies. Our policies are separation for the races in South Africa and the different nations as such. I don't agree with Mr. De La Cruz that I'm just a human being. I am a member of the Afrikaner nation. I'm not just a human being, I'm more than that. I have a certain identity which I want to uphold and which I believe most other South Africans want to uphold as well.
Okay, over here on my left, to Mr. De La Cruz's right, is Clive. We would say in the United States Derby Lewis. You say Darby Lewis.
That's the English pronunciation.
And you're with the Conservative Party. You're a representative. You're with their general council of the party, the top governing party in the top governing body in that particular party. Where do you stand in relationship to Louis over here, to the left or the right of him?
Well, I would say that we have very much in common as far as our attitude towards separation of the ethnic groups is concerned. We believe that 13 specific ethnic groupings occupy Southern Africa, and that all of them need to be accommodated in a European-style form of partition, political partition.
Accommodated or put in their place and kept where they are and not mixed with the whites?
Well, it depends on who's saying it, but you know, the bottom line is that we whites want to govern ourselves. We don't want to be governed by anyone else, and we assume that the other ethnic groupings feel the same way.
You assume that, but what if
Correct.
they don't feel the same way?
Well, that's hard cheese. I'm white. I can only speak as a white, and I'm speaking now as a white.
Okay, so you think Botha is moving too quickly, too?
I think Botha is heading on a suicidal path, which will be reversed immediately. We have a general election where the voters of this country can indicate whether or not they support him.
Some of my black listeners back in the United States are thinking right now, I thought Botha was the problem. I thought that guy was a conservative. Bob's got Clive and Louis here. They are only a slight million miles to the right of Mr. Botha. Now, how are you going to convince the black listeners in the United States that Satan incarnate with your outlook? Louis, you sound like a racist.
Well, even if I do, it doesn't matter, simply because we sincerely believe, and it's the big fact about South Africa, that South Africans are just not all of them people. They belong to different nations and groups. And nearly every nation and group wants to maintain its identity and wants to be free, and they all want to have their own political power governing themselves in their own parts of the country. And that is our policy, and that's what we want to achieve. We don't believe that South Africa is just a mix-up of any number of different people.
Well, that sounds real good. That sounds real fine. But if you really asked them and given them a national referendum or a plebiscite or something by which they've been able to express that, they don't have a vote to be able to tell you what they really want.
No, but the leftists, the liberals, they also don't ask me whether I support their policies. They want to enforce me into their system. They're not asking me for my permission to push me into a multiracial or a mixed society. So I don't see why I should be asking them for permission when I want to implement my policy.
In any case, Bob, even when the different ethnic groupings in our country opt for self-government and independence, your country doesn't acknowledge it or won't recognize it. We already have 4 states, independent black states in Southern Africa, namely Transkei, Ciskei, Venda, and Bophuthatswana.
But everybody knows those homelands are simply a segregated enclave to get them in an area where they don't bother the white people, and you didn't give them the middle of downtown Joburg.
Well, I tell you that the Transkei people wouldn't agree with you on that any more than the Zambian people or the Zimbabweans would agree with you, because that's exactly the same situation.
Dennis?
Bob, as a black, I want to say here tonight, I feel for the first time I'm between the devil and the deep blue sea here tonight, sitting between these two far-right leaders. Because South Africa, after 300 years, we are politically and socially interdependent. It's a fallacy, it's a lie to believe that we can go on separately. Ultimately, that these a minute minority group of whites who believe that they should govern the masses of South Africa will eventually also find them in a homeland. And I suggest that they find and create their own homeland.
But who's talking?
I cannot allow them to govern South Africa and dictate to 80% of the blacks in the country.
Who's talking about dominating 80% of the blacks? We don't want anything to do with them. We want, our policy is to let them run their own affairs, to take responsibility for their own affairs. And provide the money for it as well.
independently. The whites need the blacks and the blacks need the whites. Like a piano.
Of course.
What if he had a homeland? What if somebody offered you a homeland?
I would grab it. I would grab it. And you know what would happen to that homeland? And you know what would happen to that homeland? Within 50 years, everyone would be looking at it with envious eyes and saying, God, we want that homeland of the whites again.
Oh, now wait. Hang on. Now wait. There's a slight elitist attitude in there that says that we are a superior race. We can take anything and we can build it and make something of it, and those dumb blacks can't do that.
We're not saying that. We're not saying that. We are saying that those people must be allowed to develop at the pace which they find comfortable, not at the pace which we believe they should develop at. We are not prepared to patronize these people. We believe that they have certain ambitions and aspirations, and we believe the only way they can achieve those aspirations and ambitions is on their own.
Okay, then you got to create equal opportunity for the blacks. Up till now, I believe that many whites in South Africa have got where they are by trampling down blacks. They've closed over the years for us opportunities.
That's the old...
By job reservation, they've kept us out of Parliament for up to last year. Why was I kept out of Parliament for 300 years?
You're a member of Parliament now, but not the first 300 years.
But they are against it.
Yeah, look, Dennis is wrong. He's absolutely wrong. The point is that everybody wants political power. But we can't give all the nations political power in one single society. That is impossible. That's
we have in the United
Dennis
States.
is after, and he can't get... You've got it in the United States. But the blacks in the United States don't regard themselves as a different nation, as the Zulus do in South Africa. The blacks in the United States aren't just the blacks in Southern Africa.
Blacks do not believe in separateness. I, as a black leader, do not believe in separateness. In our separate ways, we cannot be divided. Divided, we will fall. And that is why people on the outside are seeing South Africa as a divided nation.
He said a while ago, you want to be with your own people, your own kind. You want to stay with them.
I am a South African. There are South Africans of all races, colors, and creeds. But here we have leaders representing white separateness. People who prefer to remain white and to retain their white identity and white leadership in South Africa.
Exactly.
It's ridiculous. It's impossible. It will destroy the South Africa which I want to see.
Well, we will destroy... Everybody wants to destroy our identity in South Africa. We will destroy... Everybody wants to destroy our identity in South Africa.
That's a fallacy.
Those are fighting words.
Oh, yes.
You know, Tom,
Would you use the nuclear power to do that?
No, we won't do that.
Well, what would you use? Troops?
It's not necessary to use that sort of force.
We can use all the powers at the disposal of a government.
Wait a minute.
But we are not going to be walked over in South Africa by anybody else. We want to maintain our freedom and independence as a nation.
If this man wants...
Be prepared, and we want the colored people to develop on their own, in their own homeland.
Colored people have never been a separate nation. I am...
They better become one.
Black and white get
as soon as possible.
What do you mean that's nonsense?
That is rubbish.
Dennis must go and read a report by the Erica Taron Commission.
I've done my reading. I not get the colored nation.
Can I just finish? Professor Erica Taron, who is a colored, and certainly is not conservative in our outlook, headed a judicial commission of inquiry into the aspirations and feelings of the colored people. She established via that commission that 80% of coloreds living in the rural areas actually believed themselves to have a specific identity, a specific ethnicity. She also further found that 60% of academics, professional people, and coloreds living in the urban areas considered themselves to be an identifiable ethnic group.
That's 5% of Erica Taron's commission recommendation. The other recommendations were that if we continue along the pathway of apartheid and separation, it will destroy South Africa. Now, these leaders here, who are here to represent a small white minority opinion,
you better believe that,
they believe in separateness.
On this segment of the South African Journal, Bob talks to Ron Miller, Deputy Minister of Foreign Affairs, Corbus Mering, Deputy Minister of Foreign Affairs Designate, and later, Jeremiah Shatunda, the United States spokesman for the organization UNITA.
21 states have sold off their South African investments, and 70 cities and 100 colleges in the United States have voted to divest. Harvard recently canceled an alumni dinner because of protests about its $400 million investment in South Africa. Do you expect these trends to continue? And if so, are you worried? Does it all concern you, or do you think there will be any backlash in the states? Deputy Miller? Deputy Minister Miller?
We are extremely concerned about the divestment and sanctions movement in the United States. We are very concerned about the movement which is occurring on the university campuses and at state level and municipal level in the United States. Because the facts of the matter in South Africa are that U.S. companies, over 300 of them, provide employment to many hundreds of thousands of people, the majority of whom are black in South Africa. If this trend continues, we're going to find that the quality of life and life opportunities for blacks in South Africa is going to suffer quite considerably.
With that being the case, Senator Lugar, who spearheaded this effort, said that it was important for the United States to be on the right side of history. He said, quote, if we turn our backs on South African blacks and give a wink to the present government, we will lose our opportunity to affect change. We really need to be on the right side of history. Deputy Minister Merring, the United States feels good now. We're on the right side of history. Is that enough?
Bob, I've often asked myself the question, is it more necessary to think you're on the right side of history, but at the same time outdoing a number of people, thousands of people, it could even be millions of people, out of a livelihood? It's very easy to talk about this from a distance of 10,000 miles or more. It's quite a different thing to see the effect of that in practice in the country that is being affected.
What about the actions of Botha, the foreign minister? You are part of that office, the Office of Foreign Affairs. He phoned several farm state senators, as you know, supposedly threatened if the veto were sustained that there would be a boycott of American grain. This apparently angered some people. Was it a bad ploy politically? Was he really serious? Was it a tactical maneuver? And do you wish now he hadn't said anything about it? Deputy Minister Miller?
No, I think Foreign Minister Botha did exactly the right thing. The squealing and the complaining is coming from those people who were against South Africa in any case. We were delighted to be able to give the facts and the figures to those senators who were prepared to listen, because only on that basis could they make a rational decision about the so-called apartheid legislation against South Africa. I'm delighted that Minister Botha had the courage and the temerity and the good sense to phone up certain senators to make sure that they knew what the facts were. The fact that we would not be able to import American grain or maize is a fact. If there are boycotts called out against South Africa, then obviously we're going to have to look after our own farmers first.
Let's talk a little bit about the wider range of foreign affairs in relationship to what's going on with some of your neighbors. Just recently, the South African forces crossed into Angola and attacked a base belonging to Namibian guerrillas. We don't hear much about this. I know there has been some concern with families who have lost young men on the front. Is that war still as hot as it was? Do you expect that the confrontation with the Angolan troops will continue? Are you still going to make incursions into this country? Either of you, feel free to respond. Deputy Miller?
Yes, Bob. May I just say that the war which is going on across the border between Southwest Africa, Namibia, and Angola is a very specific and a special type of a war. It relates to the attempts by SWAPO, which are Southwest Africa, Namibia people who've left the country and got training in Russia and other communist countries, who are attempting to come back into Namibia in order to disrupt the normal pattern of life there and to try to take over Southwest Africa, Namibia by force. And the South African Defence Force is there to prevent these people coming back into Namibia. The war is not with the Angolans. The war is with the SWAPO insurgents, the terrorists, who are trying to come back into Namibia, but use Angola as a base. In fact, they hide under the protection of some of the Angolan forces. So that is a particular type of terrorist war which is going on there. We have no aggressive intentions against Angola itself, and this has been made very clear. As far as your question is concerned, whether we wish to continue to do this, yes. It is absolutely vital that the Defence Force should protect the territory of Namibia so that peaceful reform can occur there.
Jeremiah Shatunda is the United States spokesman for the organization UNITA. We asked him if UNITA has an official statement on the current crisis situation in South Africa.
On various occasions, condemned apartheid, racism, but at the same time UNITA has constantly warned the West, along with all anti-apartheid and freedom fighters to the danger that in not accepting an orderly change from apartheid to a more just system, it appears to be clearer and clearer now that the Soviets are not really interested or committed at all to the change of apartheid or the demise of apartheid as such, but rather to the establishment of another Marxist state in that part of the African continent.
What does UNITA think it will take to enforce an orderly change in South Africa?
I think it will be necessary to continue to encourage the reforms that had already been begun in South Africa, to see that such reforms can be accelerated, to insist on such an orderly and peaceful change, so that all South Africans, regardless of the color of their skin, can participate in the political, economic, and social activities of their country, so they can all participate in shaping their own future. It is important to emphasize the need for such a peaceful change because of the fact that violence in South Africa, or the use of violent means, can indeed engulf all the countries in that area in an endless turmoil with very ghastly consequences.
What is UNITA's stand on violence?
It is therefore important to discourage use of violence and encourage dialogue, peaceful means. And we think there was a lot of room for such peaceful means to lead to successful conclusions.
How is the situation in South Africa going to affect the rest of the continent?
It's extremely important that all of those that are committed to the fight against apartheid should not lose sight of the larger picture in the whole Southern Africa, where the problems are very complex. We have the problems of apartheid in South Africa, but there is also, above all, the situation in Angola, which is far more critical than the situation in South Africa. We have in Angola right now a standing army of occupation of 45,000 Cubans, 2,500 East Germans, 1,500 Soviets, and thousands more from many Soviet bloc countries. These are the forces that today are occupying Angola, and the type of atrocities that are being committed in Angola are completely beyond description. The international community, particularly the democratic and free West, cannot, on the one hand, condemn, and quite correctly, the atrocities that are being perpetrated by apartheid in South Africa, while at the same time these same democratic countries appear to condone the violence and atrocities that are being perpetrated by the Cubans and Russians against the blacks in Angola. You cannot cherish democratic values for the West and deem these very same values somewhat irrelevant for the black Angolans. You cannot uphold so well majority rule for Zimbabwe, for Namibia, and now for South Africa, and at the same time deny these very same values to the Angolan people, who up to this very moment have never had the opportunity to elect, to vote, or choose their own governing institutions. Cuba is indeed one of the most racist nations that we have today in the Western Hemisphere. In Cuba, the blacks have a second-class citizenship status. About 60% of the Cuban population are non-white, and yet there are no blacks in the Cuban government, or in the Cuban ruling political bureau of the Central Committee. Even in Angola, the Cubans who are today fighting and getting killed in Angola against Angolans, most of them are black, while the high-ranking Cuban officers, they are white. It is therefore obvious that Fidel Castro and Mikhail Gorbachev have no moral lesson whatsoever to teach us, whether it's in the fight against apartheid or in the fight for freedom and dignity in Angola.
This is the end of the message. For further information regarding other topics available on cassette and in printed form, write Bob Larson Ministries, Box 36A, Denver, Colorado, 80236.